Chapter 171. In the eyes of everyone worshipping, Charlie left calmly. Warnia couldn't help but look at him on the way to send him back. At this time, Charlie had returned to the ordinary state of his, and she could not see any powerful cultivation base on his body. She was surprised and felt a little weird. Just now, Charlie exuded the aura of a superior, which made people fear and tremble. But now, this temperament is gone. At first glance, it looks no different from passers-by. Hard to say if it is his intentional restraint, or just an illusion. Warnia couldn't help asking, "Charlie, did you really call the spirits that time?" Charlie looked at her and smiled slightly. "Guess? If I say it's a coincidence, do you believe it?" In Warnia's mind, the appearance of Charlie summoning Twenlei flashed past unconsciously. In the flash of thunder, he stood proudly in the world, with outstanding temperament. If it is such a man, no matter which woman sees it, she will fall in love. Warnia couldn't help her heart moving, but she shook her head quickly. What a joke! Even the world's top physicists cannot control lightning. If Charlie could summon Twenlei, would he still be a poor son-in-law like he is now? Could it be that the sky thunder just now was really just a coincidence? When Charlie returned to the door, he heard the voice of his mother-in-law Elaine coming from the house. "I told you to find a capable husband, but you just didn't listen. See how capable this son-in-law is." He gave her a big 4-bedroom. More than 180 square meters. How bright. Let's look at our house again. It's a total of 120 square meters, so I'm a stubborn person. After finishing speaking, the mother-in-law said angrily, "People's son-in-law can count on it. Charlie's marriage is useless. Counting on him, I'm afraid I won't live in a big house in my life." Claire's dissatisfied voice came, "Mom, what do you envy other people doing? Besides, I have also been promoted to director. If we save a few years, can we still not afford a new house?" The mother-in-law spoofed and said, "Wait a few more years? Wait a few more years, the day Lily will be cold. Since you married Charlie, our family's life has plummeted. We can still live in Wilson's villa, now what? This broken house, my friends, all can live better than me." Claire said, "Mom, does it make sense for you to always compare like this? It's boring." The mother-in-law said angrily, "Because I can't beat others, so I'm boring. Especially boring." Charlie shook his head helplessly at this time, opened the door and walked in. Seeing Charlie's return, Elaine snorted coldly, and said, "Do you still know how to come back? Can you cook the meal? We are all hungry." Charlie smiled and said, "Mom, I'm going to cook now." After speaking, he went straight to the kitchen. Charlie couldn't be more clear about Elaine's character, snobbery and clumsy. He felt uncomfortable when he saw what other people had. If she knows that Solomon wants to give him a villa in order to make amends, she is afraid that she will come over and kneel and lick him immediately. Chapter 172. However, as for Elaine's performance, he is not ready to say anything about this house. Charlie was busy working in the kitchen. Claire walked over and said in a low voice, "Don't take what Mom said to your heart, she just admires vanity." Charlie deliberately said, "What did Mom say?" "I didn't hear a word." "Just pretend, it's strange if you didn't hear it." Claire poked Charlie's forehead with her finger. Charlie took advantage of the opportunity to hold her hand. Claire blushed and quickly looked out of the kitchen before she retracted her hands. But Charlie held onto it, took a closer look, and saw that she was carrying the bracelet he made, and he smiled and asked, "Is this bracelet effective?" "Ooh?" Claire regained her senses, nodded and said, "Don't say it is really effective. Since I put on the bracelet, my body feels like a new look and feels much more comfortable." "What exactly is your bracelet made of? Does it work?" Charlie smiled and said, "It's just a pearl." The white beads were worn on Claire's wrist, making her wrist like snow, white and tender like a new lotus root. Charlie's smooth and warm jade hand was held in his hand, like a piece of warm jade, and he didn't want to let it go. Claire also noticed it, blushing, and immediately retracted her hand and glared at him. Charlie smiled and said, "Do you want to change the house too?" Of course, who doesn't want to live in a new house? Since my mother moved out of the villa, she complained all the time that it was too small and broken. Claire sighed, then recovered and said, it's just that the house price is too expensive now, and the family doesn't have that much money, so let's forget it. With that said, Claire suddenly remembered something and blurted out, by the way, we can go to see the real estate first, and calculate how much the difference between this house and the new one would be. If the price difference is not so high, then replace this with a better one. Before Charlie had time to speak, Claire said excitedly, that's it. It's the weekend tomorrow, let's go out and check out the real estate. Seeing that she was very interested in this matter, Charlie nodded and said, since you want to see it, I will accompany you. Claire researched the real estate information on her mobile phone and decided to take a look for houses in new district with a better environment. It just so happened that someone came and knocked on the door after eating. A courier handed a small package to Charlie and said, this is for you. Please sign it. After Charlie signed the receipt, he opened it and found that there was a suite door key and several golden cards with the words Thompson Villa A05 on it. At this time, Charlie received a phone call from Solomon, the patriarch of the White family. He respectfully said on the phone, Mr. Wade, have you received the key and room card? Thompson Villa is developed by Thompson Company in Orris Hill. The most high-end real estate project. The No A05 I gave you is the largest villa, excluding the courtyard, with an area of more than 1,000 square meters. Please accept it. Charlie has heard of Thompson. They have developed villas and high-rise communities in Orris Hill, which can be said to be the highest-end real estate project in the city. The market price of such a villa is at least 100 million. It seems that Solomon is indeed bleeding heavily. So Charlie said lightly, you have a heart. Solomon said ecstatically, where is it? It is an honor for the White family to serve Mr. Wade. Back to the room, Charlie deliberately asked Claire, wife, do you like the house of Thompson Builders? Thompson first grade. Claire exclaimed, how can we afford the houses there? The prices of ordinary high-rise residential buildings there are twice as expensive as outside. But the houses are indeed the best in Orris Hill. Charlie smiled slightly and said, you can go and see it tomorrow, let's talk about whether you can buy it or not later. Claire hurriedly waved her hand and said, forget it, let's be more pragmatic and take a look at ordinary houses. Charlie smiled and said, you tell me, I have a friend at Thompson first grade. He said he can help get the internal price. We can go and see first. Chapter 173. Early the next morning, Charlie took the villa key and the companion access card given by Solomon and drove with his wife to the Thompson Sales Center. Soon, the car stopped in front of the Thompson Sales Center. At this time, the sales center is almost crowded. It seems that the citizens of Orris Hill are still very interested in the real estate of Thompson. Even if they can't afford it, they must come to open their eyes. Seeing this posture, Claire said to Charlie, Charlie, they are so expensive, we can't afford it, so don't join in the fun. Charlie smiled and said, my wife, you have come here, what are you going to do? Besides, I really want to see the world, come with me and have a look. Claire said helplessly, well, it's just time to see what the top Thompson looks like. After entering, the people gathered around the huge sand table, listening to the shopping guide explaining the general situation of the Thompson community. The area of real estate developed by Thompson in Orris Hill is very large. On the periphery of the real estate, there are high-rise residential buildings, which are relatively ordinary housing. The area ranges from 120 square meters to 240 square meters. The price is very high, starting at $80,000. As for the deepest, most comfortable and perfect prime location of the real estate, it is the villa area with single-family houses. The size of the villa area ranges from 300 square meters to more than 1,000 square meters. Because it has a yard and a basement, the price is very expensive, at 130,000 square meters. In other words, the villa Solomon gave to Charlie was worth 130 million. The shopping guide also introduced, we provide separate property and security services for distinguished villa owners. Don't look at ordinary houses and villas in the same community, but there is a fence around the villa area. isolated from ordinary houses. The ordinary residential area outside is already very safe. People are not allowed to enter, and the villa area inside is safer. To put it simply, if a thief enters the ordinary residential area outside, it is absolutely impossible. Then enter the villa area through the security of the villa area, so the owner of the villa area is extremely safe, you can rest assured. At this time, a woman said angrily, "You are too much, right? This is to let the owners of the ordinary residential area outside help the owners of the villa area to block bullets." Many people around nodded one after another, listening to the shopping guide. It really meant that. Charlie felt that the voice was a bit familiar, and when he looked up, he realized that it was a woman with heavy makeup. That woman is Claire's cousin, Wendy. Why is she here? Charlie and Claire were a little surprised. Looking next to her, her father Noah Wilson, mother Horia Chien, and her brother Harold were all there. Could it be that their family came to buy a house? Claire whispered to Charlie, "Uncle and family are all here, let's go." Charlie shook his head. "What are you doing? If they are here, can't we be here?" Claire said, "I'm afraid they will run on you again." Chapter 174. Charlie smiled slightly and said, "Don't worry, your husband has been run on for so many years. There are already more lice and itching." "Okay," Claire nodded. At this time, the shopping guide said with a smile to Wendy, who had just protested, "This lady, it's true that we, Thompson, have always regarded the villa owners as the most distinguished owners. Our private swimming pool, high-end sports clubs, high-end health clubs, golf courses, and Michelin restaurants specially introduced from Italy are all opened in the villa area and only serve the villa owners." Wendy said angrily, "What do you mean, the owner of our high-rise living outside are not humans? We also spent money, okay? Why don't we enjoy these supporting facilities?" The shopping guide said, I'm sorry, we also have a club in the high-rise area outside. If you buy a house, you can use the high-rise area club." Wendy asked, "Can't I go there to use high-end health club? Can't I go to play golf?" "No," the shopping guide said, "the facilities in our house are specially prepared for villa owners." "I'm really sorry." Harold was very annoyed and said, "What the H*LL are you doing? We are still planning to buy your 240 square meter largest high-rise residential building, 167 million. With so much money, you don't let us use the supporting facilities inside? Mom? Yes, believe it or not, I won't buy it." The shopping guide smiled slightly and said, "Sir, let me tell you that when we built this project, we built the outer circle of ordinary residences because of the city's requirement that we were not allowed to develop a pure villa area. That's why we built these attached ordinary residences, and everything in our place is respected by the owners of the villa area. If you can't accept it, you can buy a villa, or you can buy nothing at all. To be honest, our outer flats are also selling very well, and we sold 80 on the opening day." Harold's expression suddenly became ugly. He thought that if he said not to buy, the other party would start to think about their stance. But he didn't expect that people would be so rigid. The subtext of the shopping guide is, if you want to buy you can buy, if you don't want to, just F***ck off. The angered Harold blurted out to his parents, "I'm going, don't buy it, we can buy it wherever when we have money." Harold's mother, Horia, said, "Where are you going? This is the house I am after, and I can't look at the houses elsewhere." Harold persuaded, "Mom, isn't it just for the wealthy people in the villa area to whom we will stand guard and block bullets? You have to be treated differently. What's good about this place? You know what a tea." Horia said, "Even if the outside high-rise environment and facilities are not as good as the inner villa area, it is the best in the high-rise area of Oris Hill. The villa your grandma lives in is too old. The decorations were done many years ago, and I've long been bored." Noah Wilson on the side also nodded and said, "Your grandma's current villa is indeed too old, the surrounding area is also remote, and there are no supporting facilities. If you want to buy a pack of cigarettes at night, you have to drive a long way. How can the facilities be so complete here?" As he said again, "I have the same idea as your mother, just buy it here." Harold sighed. he was just pretending to be haughty in front of the shopping guide. He was irritated, and suddenly saw two familiar figures, which made him immediately interested, and blurted out, "Oh, Claire, Charlie, why are you two here?" Claire didn't expect to be seen by Harold. Seeing his voice attracted the attention of his family, he laughed twice and said, "I and Charlie came out to take a look." Harold immediately said contemptuously, "Why? With your family's strength, plus your waste husband, you still want to buy a house in a high-end place like Thompson?" Chapter 175. Harold naturally looked down upon Charlie by 10,000. And he was full of resentment towards Claire, then the company director. Seeing that the couple came to Thompson to see the house, they wanted to seize the opportunity to satirize them. When Charlie heard that Harold dared to spray on him and his wife, he immediately sneered, "What? People like you can come to Thompson for inspection, why can't we?" Harold sneered and said, "I can come because our family can afford it." "Can you afford to buy a house here?" Charlie smiled, "How do you know that I can't afford it?" Harold snorted, "How can you afford to have a ghost? Do you know how much this house is? The smallest one is 120 square meters, more than 80,000 square meters, and it costs 10 million. 10 million, you hear?" Charlie laughed, "I don't bother to buy the smallest house. If I want to buy it, I will also buy the largest." "You're poo." Harold said coldly, "The biggest 240 flats can you afford?" Wendy also laughed, "Yeah, Charlie, can you afford a 240 square meters house? Such a big house, even our family can't buy it." "How can you?" Charlie looked at her, smiled and asked, "Who told you that I want to buy a house of 240 square meters? Wendy snorted contemptuously, "What? Didn't you say you want to buy the biggest one? Can't install it now?" Charlie laughed and said, "Wendy, you are so unpromising. Didn't you see that there is a large villa area on this table? The villa inside is the largest house." "Bah!" Wendy said disdainfully, returning the villa. "The smallest villa inside is tens of millions, and the expensive one is even hundreds of millions. You can't afford it for 8 lifetimes with your rag life." Charlie smiled and said, "What a coincidence, I just have one set, and it's the biggest one." "Hava hava." Harold's family laughed forward and backwards, pointing to Charlie, and said contemptuously, "You still buy the largest villa? My God, are you laughing at us too?" Many customers who watched the house also heard Charlie's words, and laughed one by one. "It looks like a stinky rag, and he's still buying a villa? If he can afford this villa, then I can afford the entire Thompson product. It's really bragging not to write drafts." Claire's face was also a little unsustainable, and she whispered in Charlie's ear, "Charlie, what are you talking nonsense? Aren't you ashamed of talking nonsense?" Charlie smiled and said, "What's the shame, to be honest?" Harold smiled backwards and closed together, and said, "Have you heard? Your own wife doesn't believe you, and the eyes of the people are sharp. People like you are not even fit to enter this sales hall." After speaking, he said viciously, "Wait, I will tell the sales lady to drive you out." Immediately afterwards, Harold immediately greeted a sales lady who came over and pointed to Charlie and said, "Beauty, what's the matter with you? Why did you let such rubbish rag in?" This kind of person said without embarrassment to buy your best villa. With such people in the most expensive villa here, those of us who are really capable of buying a house don't want to take it. The sales lady glanced at Charlie, and she could also see that Charlie's clothes were ordinary, not what a rich man should have. Not to mention buying a villa, even the client who buys the smallest 3-bedroom apartment is more decent than him. The surrounding people also started to booze, saying, "Hurry up and get this guy out, it affects our mood too much."